Okay, wonderful. I think everyone's just pouring into the virtual auditorium here. We were running a bit late. I do apologize for starting this session a little bit late, but without further ado, we're going to start this session called Decentralized Trials, Accelerators and Decelerators, and the Role of Innovative Technologies. I'm going to hand over to the esteemed moderator, Dr. Alex Kahana, our blockchain expert in healthcare for the UN. So over to you, Alex, and really looking forward to enjoying this conversation.
Hi, good morning, everyone from New York City, and thank you so much for HITLAB Innovators Summit to have us speak at this session, and special thanks to Rama Rao, CEO and founder of Bloqcube, who has sponsored this event. We have a real treat for the next 45 minutes, and with us is a esteemed panel that really are deep knowledge in clinical trial management and decentralized technologies. For those who don't know me, I'm on a mission to blockchainize healthcare and healthify the crypto space, and wear many hats, and for this hat, I'll be glad to moderate. And with us, as you see, we have Bridget Siegel, who is VP and Head R&D Procurement for Takeda. We have Craig Lipset, who is co-chair for DITRA, the Decentralized Trials Research and Research Alliance. We have Kevin Coker, the CEO of Proxima Clinical Research, and my dear friend, PK Narang, who is a strategic advisor for Bloqcube. So perhaps we'll start with the larger context that COVID, a lot of people think that COVID, a lot of things don't work, but one thing that people do think that it works is the whole idea of vaccines and research and development. So how about I start with a round of everyone just presenting themselves briefly and enter into this introduction of decentralized trials. So Bridget, let's start with you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Alex, and good day to all of you. And I want to thank Rama Rao of Bloqcube for inviting me to participate on today's panel. My name is Bridget Siegel. I am here today to share my own views and opinions regarding decentralized clinical trials that I've formed over the last 25 years. I've been in the healthcare industry. I'm currently the Vice President and Head of R&D Procurement at Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and I've spent my career working in the pharma industry, working at the top 5 pharma companies in R&D and leading global teams in strategic sourcing and serving as the head of procurement for clinical and patient services at Montefiore Health System in New York. My experiences range from designing and running clinical trials, developing strategic sourcing strategies for drug research and development of both animal and human trials, to working with patient advocacy groups. And every step of the way, I've seen myself as a change agent to accelerate the innovations and technologies that focus on reducing patient burden, reaching global patient populations, and all the while supporting medical and scientific outcomes.
Thank you, Bridget.
So thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Let's move on to Craig, please. A few words about yourself.
Thanks, Alex, and hello to the HITLAB community. It's good to be back here with you all. My name is Craig Lipset. I am an independent advisor working with pharma, with investors, with tech companies that are looking to bring innovative solutions forward to address the challenges of drug development. I was previously at Pfizer for 12 years, serving as head of clinical innovation, where I had the opportunity to help design and lead the industry's first fully decentralized trial. Today, I also serve as the co-chair and co-founder for DTRA, the Decentralized Trials and Research Alliance. DTRA, their introduction, is that DTRA is a global nonprofit collaboration today comprised of over 130 organizations working together to help ease the global adoption of decentralized clinical trials and decentralized research. DTRA members include regulators in pharma, tech companies and service providers, site networks and advocacy groups, working together through a discrete set of member-defined initiatives meant to make this operating environment easier for all and improve access to clinical research.
Thank you, Craig. And I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about DITRA and its work. Kevin, please, a few words about yourself and Proxima.
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. Kevin Coker. I'm the CEO of Proxima Clinical Research. We're a small CRO based out of Houston, Texas, but have reached throughout the United States and North America. We work primarily with smaller pharma and small med tech and medical device customers. Before Proxima, I was the head of research for McKesson Specialty Health and the U.S. Oncology Network, where I managed their oncology research activities. My background, I was trained as scientifically as a molecular pathologist and have been in clinical research now for about 20 years. I'm also on the board of a 3D bioprinting company called Volumetric Bio that was just recently acquired a couple weeks ago. And I serve on the board of a couple of investment banks and angel groups that invest in newer technology, smaller emerging technology. And I spend most of my time working with smaller companies on their regulatory and clinical milestones that they need to hit. Great to be here today.
Thank you, Kevin, so much. And last, but of course, never least, PK, please, a few words about yourself, and we'll start with our first question.
Sure. Thanks for the invite, Rama, and I'm happy to be here. My background and training is in clinical pharmacology, so that's the origin I came out from. I've spent the last 30 or 35 years or so in drug development and regulatory space. Half of my career was in, I would say, on the clinical side of things, and the other half on the regulatory side of things. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm working as an advisor to Bloqcube at the moment.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I'll ask Jerry from HITLAB to kindly, before we start with our first question, please post, you can see here the first question. Do you represent an organization that conducts or help conducts clinical trials? Please choose the size, anywhere from a clinical trial site, a large pharma, biotech or small pharma, large CRO, small to mid-sized CRO, academic center, hospital, or anything other. You can put it in the chat or none of the above. Please vote now. Do it one more time. Do you represent an organization that conducts or help conducts clinical trials? And if yes, please choose one of those answers. I'll count to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And question number 2, please, Jeff. Post, very good. We see that most of our audience here represents biotech or small pharma, with some from academic centers, and a lot of you did not answer. And let's move to the next question. Question number 2. Are you planning to change your clinical trials to improve efficiency and better handle decentralized trials? Okay, yes, I'm already doing this. Yes, I'm thinking of doing this. No, I anticipate not doing so. No, unsure what to do in the future or not applicable. Please answer if you're planning to change your clinical trial systems to improve efficiencies and better handle decentralized trials. Yes or no. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see that. And our answer is not applicable to most of us, and most are unsure. So this is great. Thank you so much, Jeff, for putting that on. And this is the propos of our first question that we'll start with Craig of, what is decentralized trials? A lot of them are unsure or do not know even what that is. And I couldn't ask a better person than the co-chair of the DITRA, or the Decentralized Trial and Research Alliance. So please, Craig, a few minutes on what is decentralized trials.
Alex, it's great to start off with those poll questions. Just for a reminder for many of our audience that are from the biotech and pharma community, but perhaps an important note for many that are in the other camp when it came to question number 1. Conventional clinical trials have typically required research participants, those people who volunteer, to travel in and out of research sites, locations, in order to participate. Typically, those sites may be located a substantial distance from where those individuals may live. The odds of a patient's own local community doctor being the investigator in a trial that's right for them are slim to none. And so a typical research participant may travel an hour, 2 hours or more in order to get to and from a research site in order to participate. Now, prior to the pandemic, there were investments and experiments around this idea of decentralizing clinical trials. And in fact, there were recommendations that the FDA had put together on this topic, together with the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, and a similar public-private partnership in Europe, the IMI, had a project on this theme. So what do we mean by decentralized clinical trials? A decentralized trial is one that's using either technology or process changes or a combination of the two to create opportunities for visits to take place outside of a traditional research site. So why do I use that definition? It can involve technologies, telemedicine and other uses of video, remote patient monitoring, patients using electronic diaries or other devices. It can involve process changes, like the use of home health and visiting nurses, like our ability to have patients have specimens acquired at local labs or local imaging centers, our ability to extend the drug supply chain so study medication can reach and be administered to people outside of a research setting. It can involve one or both, but all with the intent so that visits do not have to take place at a research site. Now, I also use that definition, Alex, to make clear that this doesn't mean that all visits have to take place in the home. What I'm emphasizing here is there's the option for that. There's the potential for that because we want ultimately to give people more choice in how they participate. We don't want to necessarily take visits away from those that actually can get to a site and feel good getting to a site because they're in high contact with study coordinators and investigators that make them feel good. But for the many that can't access a site, how do we create more of these options? And that's the definition that I would go with.
Thank you, Craig. And I'll continue this question and I'll ask PK. So in this sense, decentralization is used from a remoteness or geography or access perspective. PK, do you think of decentralization in other terms? Are there other technologies that are evoked when you see the word decentralized?
Oh, I think Craig has pretty much covered most of the pieces or elements that generally are deemed associated with the word decentralized type trials. And I think if you look at some of the work, let's say Office of Clinical Excellence for the Oncology Group is doing at the FDA, they're talking about the same thing, that there are places and times when patients are unable to come to site for whatever the reason might be. I mean, there are plenty of reasons. For those times, if there is a way to implement some of these other tools and technologies that are available, it certainly makes for a more patient-centric approach. And a patient-centric approach is certainly gaining popularity and momentum. And decentralized trials are going to be, going along exactly in that same path. And I think people just need to get a better understanding of the prospective nature in which they may have to define how the data that's collected in domains outside a provincial site, how they're going to be managed in terms of assuring data integrity, quality, which is what the regulators will want at the end, that there's some assurances there and that you have somehow pre-specified certain elements that how you will analyze that data. So I think Craig covered most of the significant elements of decentralized trials.
Very good. Okay, so maybe before I move to Bridget and Kevin to hear from their perspective, let us post question number 3, Jeff. Can you do that, please? How many issues have you had in implementing decentralized trials? No issues, some issues, unmanageable without changing the system, large number of issues that would require reimagining our whole processes. Again, how many issues have you had for those who have done decentralized trials in 2021? No issues, some issues, tons of issues, and a whole redo of the system. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see what we have here. Yep, we have some are manageable. Between no issues, we have the majority. So it seems that this new way of doing things is working, and which is a good number for something that just started. And perhaps the next question, if you can post, Jerry, please. Okay, how much risk do you foresee in cyber attacks like ransomware? Not concerned, somewhat concerned, neutral, highly concerned but unclear, highly concerned and clear on next steps. So let's talk a little bit about cyber. How much of you are worried about cyber attacks, hacks, and ransomware? Again, not at all, somewhat concerned, neutral, highly concerned but not clear what to do, or concerned and have a plan. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and the most of us are concerned, but they're not sure what to do. So with that, let's give our veteran Bridget Siegel the opportunity to kind of give a roadmap. You've been doing this here for decades, the whole problem of attack vulnerability that has to do with centralization versus decentralization. Can you tell us a little bit your thoughts on the security vulnerability, either on data and processes that you have witnessed and has changed throughout the years? Bridget, go ahead.
Thanks, Alex. I mean, it's complex, right? So, but think about this. We've been doing these trials since, for a long time. And in the 90s, Web 1.0, and as we focused on making trials faster and to improve patient and physician experience. But all along the way, we've been validating our systems, making sure we've got our data, the platforms validated and CFR Part 11 compliant. All of those types of things have been built into our systems from the very beginning. Now, as we're pursuing more and more wearables and other types of things that may be introduced into our decentralized world, not just e-consent or remote-based monitoring, but some of the more vulnerable ones, I think that we have to ensure we are validating where it's robust. We'll go through the same rigors as we would with any other device. And as we move into Web 3.0, the same types of considerations need to be made. We never would cut a corner. We want to make sure that we're bringing the regulators along the journey and ensuring that everything has, every T is crossed, every I is dotted. And again, from a procurement perspective, these are the things that I ensure I bring all of my experts into when we are looking at certain suppliers bringing in new technologies, that we do just that.
Thank you so much. And I'm curious, Kevin, you have a very complex operation with your CRO. What do you see in this digital world, cyber world, in terms of not only vulnerability and security, but also in terms of the management of the processes and the complexity of them? Bridget mentioned, IoT and all that. How do you foresee that, or how are you dealing with that?
Well, let me, I'll just tell you quickly, I started Proxima about 4 years ago. Before that, I started a software company that was working in the next-gen sequencing space. And, as an executive, as someone that's just, sitting behind their computer or out doing webinars or talking, you don't have a lot of frame of reference for cybersecurity or these attacks. You read what is in your inbox. You hear maybe from other people, maybe a horror story or two, but you don't have any concept of how this applies to you directly. Well, when I started that small software company, I thought about cybersecurity as email hacks or, again, something that I could relate to. When we posted our first database into the cloud using a group that everyone knows here very well, and then we had a cybersecurity group help us put that data cloud, that test data cloud, out on the where we could access it. And then we started looking at what the vulnerability of that data asset was, and then actually the number of pings or attempted hits to that data asset out in the cloud. It was shocking. You have no idea how these data assets or what you put in the cloud is under constant attack. I would put it in terms of being in a rainstorm or a thunderstorm. I was incredibly surprised by the number of attempts there were just to get that data set, essentially the first day that we put it out. It really scared me. We never had an issue at that previous company, but it did put the fear into me in that when we started a CRO, and we were responsible for not only our own data set, but other people's data. We wanted to do it with experts. And so we got a cybersecurity expert, a firm that helped us and continues to help us manage those data assets, that allows to check them essentially every month, so that we're understanding what type of vulnerabilities might occur. And also just looking at like penetration tests, and we have people that sort of go in and try to hack these data assets from time to time, are not our own, but these test places where we have. So it is something that, you know, we should have a healthy fear of. And for folks that may not deal with this on a day-to-day basis, definitely go back, make sure your insurance policies are all up to date. When you're working with vendors, ask them about their cybersecurity insurance, ask them for, you know, their tests and how they have tested their data, and ask that for your vendors, because it is something to certainly be concerned about for sure.
Thank you, Kevin. And yes, definitely don't answer cold emails and press on links you don't know where it's coming from. I know that Craig will have to excuse himself at 45 after, so I would love to use his, you know, we spoke about data from a security perspective, a few brief remarks regarding privacy and regulatory compliance. If you could speak to that, a few words. How does DITRA cope with this? What are the aspects, GDPR, the other legislation done in the US? How do we manage the privacy and compliance to privacy in the decentralized trial landscape?
You know, there are a lot of amazing Venn diagrams in the research community right now. Bridget hinted at some with regards to momentum related to sensor and wearables and other devices as we digitize and modernize our endpoints, those things that we're measuring in our research studies. We have other initiatives related to electronically sourcing more of our data from more places like electronic health records or otherwise. Very often those can be mediated through patients, including ways to enable through, say, blockchain and other approaches, people to give more permission and consent in this process. Decentralized trials take advantage of a lot of these, but a lot of these issues are not unique to decentralized clinical trials. Certainly, as we think about data integrity is one of the two cornerstones that regulators scrutinize most when it comes to all of our clinical trials, including in decentralized. And when speaking with the regulators, having confidence in data integrity and patient safety are the two elements that matter most to operators, regulators, and others. It's really the same rules that we're held to for all of our research studies, just as they are with GDPR and other privacy rules, California or otherwise. Now, there are unique privacy considerations as we're doing more in people's homes. As we have video, as we have right now, I can start to see what artwork Bridget likes. I can, if I'm sending visiting nurses into the home? Will they start to see certain artifacts around my house, bills and other information, other loved ones and in my home? Are they suddenly walking in the background on video? That sensor and device that we're using in our study, is it capturing, because it's a consumer device, is it capturing all sorts of other data, maybe that we're not fully eyes wide open to? And so for these reasons and others, there are additional considerations that we have to lay down when we are looking to decentralize, whether it's around some of those visual artifacts that I mentioned, whether it's making sure that if we are using a wearable or other device, we're accountable for what data that device is capturing and have to have full confidence in the technology that we're looking to use in our studies. At its core, though, Alex, it always seems to come back to confidence in data integrity and patient safety, the same rules that we have for all of our studies.
Wonderful. Thank you. And it's a very, very complex topic that you were able to explain in a very simple way. Bridget, I want, because I really appreciate your rigor and in the compliance and understanding, what a heavily regulated field we work in. Could you speak a little bit to perhaps the gap between the current legislation and where you see the horizon is coming? I recently read that China came up with their own privacy laws, so is the US a leader in the field? Is it a laggard in the field? What are the gaps that need to be filled in, and what order, how quick do we and aggressive do the legislators and regulators need to be leaders in the field?
That's a great question, Alex. And as someone who's been working in the global environment for also most of my career, these are things that aren't just unique to decentralized trials. They're back to what Craig was saying. It's patient safety and data integrity, and from the United States to every single country that we work in. So what I look for in my own team is the ability to stay on top of every single change that would potentially need an update to our master services agreements and all of those types of documents, including the data and the clinical trial documents themselves. These are all, it's works in progress as we introduce more and more complicated trials. So the answer is that every team, every company needs to ensure that they look at all the emerging thought leaders, countries where they're putting in new regulations and making the adjustments sometimes on the fly. We see our protocols will need to have supplements to these to the initial thoughts and the way they were being operationalized. And and Craig, I'm sure you've seen this many times in your world. And when you put together the very first decentralized trial, I want to know how many amendments you had to that protocol. So in staying lockstep with our regulators where we'll be filing, we need to ensure that we're listening, we have great relationships with them, and that they see the community of biopharma as partners to bring them along, and that they're bringing us along in the changes in the regulations.
Thank you, Bridget, for that.
Alex, I'm just going to add one quick build on Bridget's note, because then I apologize to the group that I'm going to drop off in a minute. But Bridget raises such an important point that global regulators are open for business, and they're signaling that in every way imaginable, from guidance documents to actively participating in groups, whether the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, DTRA, where they're a member, or others. In many ways, they're pulling the industry and in trying to encourage drug development teams to show innovative approaches, bring them forward, give the regulators something to react to. Don't assume that there's a no and you can't do it if you've never asked. Give them the opportunity. Now, at the end of the day, the FDA is a large and complex organization, just like Pfizer, just like Columbia University, just like any large organization. And so the individuals in a review division are not necessarily beholden to the same views as management and those in policy roles. We have to engage them, as Bridget is saying, and work collaboratively to share these approaches. DTRA is addressing that. So many other collaborations are, but I would encourage all in this space to not make assumptions that the FDA isn't ready for you to engage. I do apologize for dropping off here. I look forward to following up with you all and continuing a great conversation.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for underlying the need to communicate, to educate, and push the regulators forward in this ever-evolving landscape. I want to use the last 15 minutes. Jerry, can you put in question number 5? Thank you so much. Question number 5. Okay, are you budgeting for changes to your clinical trial management system for conducting efficient clinical trials? No change, some change, significant change, but budget is not allocated, significant changes with a budget, and a complete overhaul. So the question is budgeting for the new type of clinical trial management systems, no change, some change, significant change without a budget, significant change with a budget, or a complete overhaul. Okay, let's do it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the result here is, okay, no one answered on that because no one is budgeting. So for the last questions, and then I'll let Rama say a few words. Kevin, is Proxima budgeting, or is it 0 also, no budgeting for these new decentralized clinical trials?
Well, that's timely. We're actually having budget meetings next week, and I can tell you that our technology budget is increasing every year, and part of that is being driven by our own costs to accommodate decentralized trials, but it's also with regards to vendor management in this new environment. One of the things that we have, I guess, I wouldn't say necessarily struggled with, but we look to providers or third parties to help us with decentralized trials. There's a lot of different aspects of these trials, and what we used to struggle with a few years ago was e-consent and patient recruitment. And although those things are still things that I'd say aren't fully sorted out, I think that's now fairly typical and almost expected in many trials, whether that's a fully decentralized trial or a hybrid trial. But now the things that are more challenging to manage are things like site payments, interactions with sites, logistics, making sure product is getting to sites. And so those are the things that we rely on a lot of third parties for, and our ability to manage that is there is a certain financial component to it that we are certainly seeing in like our next year's budget for sure.
Great. Well, I'm glad to see that someone, at least in the audience and here, is budgeting and thinking about next year. PK, can you tell us, from the landscape that you see, you're in touch with many possible clients and vendors that are looking at upping their technology game. Do you see that there's a understanding, a allocation, a serious attempt to try to elevate the current services?
So I think generally speaking, I think as the world is moving forward with new technologies, I think these conversations are going on in several different groups and businesses. So it's obvious that people are looking at what frameworks regulators are setting, what type of expectations they are building, and what changes they will have, clients or businesses will have to make to accommodate those needs. So like I can say briefly that if you look at the drug supply chain, quality act that FDA has, the Safety Act that FDA has since 2013, it practically goes into effect on November 2023. So I know that inside the FDA and also the businesses, the pharma businesses, are trying to make adjustments to their systems to upgrade their systems so they can get into this track and trace business and assure some kind of give FDA the assurance that they can track, a product, a vial at a lot level as they go forward, because they can't do it internally. So in case there's a recall of some kind, it takes 3 to 4 days now to get to that point that where people know which file sits where. But now working with distributors, manufacturers, and dispensers, the agency is working to make sure that this thing can be done much more rapidly. So I know recently FDA was involved with IBM, KPMG, and Merck and Walmart in a project they ran. And in that, if you look at the project report, it actually says that generally takes 3 days for a recall to be managed appropriately. And with this blockchain implemented, the project they did with the FDA, they were able to do that in less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds. So making major investments. People are looking into this area of how do you leverage blockchain and optimize the efficiencies.
So this is a good segue. We have a few minutes left, and I would like to offer also Rama the opportunity to say a few words. If he promises that he will leave 2 minutes, so at 11:58 we can go through and thank our panelists. We spoke about data privacy, we spoke about data security, we have not spoken about data sovereignty. And perhaps if you could speak to that a little bit. Decentralization was more on the remote aspect of the use. Perhaps decentralization has other meanings. So if you could speak a little bit about your vision of what decentralization means and how that impacts data sovereignty. And then with 2 minutes left, I will have a quick 30-second rush between the panelists to say a final word. So Rama, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Alex. Firstly, thanks so much to everybody for their insights. The way I look at it is, especially given Bloqcube has been in this space for the past 4 years, pioneering, evangelizing the need for blockchain-driven or distributed ledger-driven systems. Some of the points made by the earlier speakers are spot on. Whether it is what PK talked about, the speed with which track and tracing in a blockchain gets faster than existing systems, whether it's a question of cybersecurity and decreasing vulnerability to ransomware, or whether it's a question like Bridget was alluding to, about multiple devices coming together to get information. Our belief is that decentralized trials, whether hybrid or otherwise, need a decentralized software, and a distributed ledger anchors decentralized software systems. Even more than that, as we then build a vision for the future where we get to digital IDs or self-sovereign IDs, where patients or research participants can participate with data and conceal their identity, it not only avoids situations where the diseases have got stigma associated with it, it also enables a much faster collaboration to resolve potential clinical issues or clinical hypotheses. And the current COVID crisis, whether it's the emergence of Omicron or whatever, is a classic case in point, where vaccine effectiveness studies would require definitely a slightly different approach than what has been currently pursued. Quite apart from that, I just like the point that Kevin made, that this, as Proxima does a cyber check by every month, that may not be available or being done by a lot of other people. So how does software or algorithmic trust, as encapsulated by distributed ledger, enable that to happen so people can execute on it? And then once that data starts flowing, how do patients or research participants protect it? So they have full, full control and authorize only those pieces that need to be shared with people. That is the challenge, and that's the area that we're working in Bloqcube. And as a first step, just built an e-clinical system that addresses some of the pain points like e-consent or multiple protocol amendments, etc., in the ETMF to make life a little easier for the experts, operational experts in the field.
Wonderful, wonderful. And with less than 300 seconds left, Bridget, some final remarks, maybe some thoughts on a new business model that is emerging, and then I will go to PK, and finally I'll ask Kevin to say the final word. So go ahead, Bridget.
But as somebody who has to work very, very closely with our finance colleagues, it's all about building business cases. And the case for change is so obvious. And when you put the total cost of ownership together in terms of the old process and the new process, thinking about if we do not change, and we have great examples from PK in terms of what he said around finding recalls of medication, to making changes in our central trial management systems quickly. The cost of not changing is tremendous. So we can budget all of that in. I have years of experience in doing that from all kinds of technologies. So I look forward to seeing who's going to be adopting the Bloqcube e-clinical software first, and how that, and doing a total cost of ownership analysis. So
fantastic.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your questions, and thank you again for allowing me to participate today. It's wonderful.
Wonderful. We're honored, Bridget, with all your experience. This was wonderful. PK, final 30 seconds.
So I would just say that I think, picking up on the theme that Bridget mentioned, I can also say a recent publication from Boehringer Ingelheim, which has looked at the distributed ledger technology and system like Bloqcube that was developed with IBM, and what type of difference it made. I think it's, for the audience, it'll be worth going through and checking it out, that what type of efficiencies they were able to bring into the system. So I think anything you can do to leverage the new technology, which brings in, control over privacy, trust, and immutability of data, which is what ultimately we want at the end of the day, I think can only be a plus for most businesses.
Thank you, thank you. And Kevin, final words, 2025 Proxima, besides being a unicorn, what say you?
We're creatures of habit, and we often just continue to do the same things because that's the way we did it yesterday. I know COVID has changed a lot about, how we operate in this field, and a lot of that's for the better. But you asked the question earlier about, are you thinking about using decentralized approaches in trials, or I'm reframing that, but I would really strongly encourage everyone to think about that, no matter what level of within a company that you're at. Go back to your study managers and really push them to say, are we doing everything that we can to apply technology to the problems that we're solving today? Because our sponsors and people that we work with are really pushing us and forcing us to think about things in a very different way. And again, we think about it with certain types of projects, but then we get back to an oncology study or a cardiovascular study, and we start to think about it in the very same way. So I would just encourage everyone to really challenge themselves, challenge their internal study team, or challenge their external providers, or reach out to people and find out, what are you doing, in a decentralized approach? Is there one or two things that we should be doing that could make a big difference in what we do every day?
Thank you, Kevin. And I think that's a great propos. I want to thank the panel for their excellent interventions. I want to thank HITLAB for organizing this, and again, Rama and Bloqcube for sponsoring this. And I'll finish by saying one sentence if people can't kind of wrap their head around what change are we talking about. If Web 1.0 was reading data and Web 2.0 is about reading and writing data, then Web 3.0 is about reading, writing, and owning data. And that's really the essence of what we're looking about. All the derivatives that come from ownership, be it from a security, privacy, and sovereignty perspective, that is the change, and that is what decentralization is all about. So thank you, and thank you, Jerry. I pass the baton to you, and have a continuing excellent day.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you rest of the team for a really magnificent conversation. You certainly taught me a couple more things about decentralized trials, and the conversation continues, of course, in the networking rooms. There is a dedicated decentralized clinical trials accelerators and decelerators in the role of the distributed ledger technologies. Wow, what a mouthful. A post-panel discussion in the networking rooms. If you guys want to continue the conversation on that side, unfortunately, we've run out of time on the main stage, but please feel free to hop on over there. That dedicated networking room will be open for the next 90 minutes or so if you guys want to continue the conversation with the rest of the audience. So thank you very much, Alex, for moderating, everybody else for coming on, and Rama, congrats for getting such a wonderful team together to talk about this important subject.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And with that, we're
Thanks,
on time,
everyone.
and we'll see you all on the next panel at 12.